Good evening and welcome to a new edition of To The Point. This evening we'll be touching on quite a critical issue, which is intra-African relations, especially on the trade side. With us this evening is a distinguished gentleman who just took over quite a prominent post. With us this evening is Dr. Oke Orama, who is the president of the Afrexim Bank, which is the African Export and Import Bank here, stationed here in Egypt, Cairo. A pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Ina.
Initially, let me congratulate you on your new position. I know you just was sworn in as the new president a few days ago, so we wish you the very best of luck in your endeavors. And maybe if you can just highlight to our viewers who are not aware of what is a cornerstone of Afrexim Bank. It's not a bank that has a high profile on the local side. Thus, maybe we should just shed light. What is the real mission of this bank in Egypt and in Africa as a continent?
Thank you very much. The African Export-Import Bank was created quite a long time ago, in 1993. Okay. And it started operating here in Egypt in 1994, and Egypt played a major role in creating it. The main purpose of the African Export-Import Bank is to promote and finance intra and extra African trade. Okay. And by that, what its ultimate goal is to promote regional integration in Africa and to help Africa to use collective self-reliance to advance its economic fortunes.
Even though we're a continent that is quite rich in natural resources, in human resources, I mean, we're a very gifted continent by God, so to speak, yet we're not using our resources correctly or efficiently. And at the same time, we cannot say that intra-Africa cooperation, trade, the volume of business, economic development is not high. Why?
Well, the problem is based on colonial legacies. Because of the colonial legacies we had, many countries saw trade largely in the north-south direction, rather in the intra-regional direction. And that is underpinned by the fact that prior to independence and subsequently afterwards, the colonial masters used the colonies in Africa to source raw materials for their industries in their different countries. Yes. So when countries gained independence, the infrastructure for trade in many of the countries was created and organized to only sustain that kind of trade. The infrastructure to sustain intra-regional trade was non-existent. And look at Africa, a continent with 54 countries, so much divided. Many people in one country don't even know what is happening in their neighboring countries. And you know, risk is about perception. So if what you don't know is risky, so people don't even talk about Africa as an opportunity. They only see Africa as risk. So that is why you've had these very low levels of intra-regional trade.
Who sees Africa as risk? Is it our perception of ourselves, or is it the West's perception of us?
Well,
or is this a stereotype or an image that has been created to shadow over this continent, to always keep us in an easily manipulated way?
Let me say it is both. Because let me demonstrate it. Prior to 1980s, when Africa was I would say booming, yes. Africa was doing much better than Asia, including China. Africa's trade, Africa's exports were higher than developing Asia, including China. In fact, China was thought, Asia, was thought to be the problem because Africa was seen as an opportunity. But even then, with such an opportunity, most of the trade, 90%, was also in the north-south direction. We didn't have intra-regional trade. And that was because the continent was so divided that there was lack of information flows, and the infrastructure for the cross-border trade within Africa wasn't there. So the trade wasn't going on. And the risk emerged because people don't know what is happening in their neighbors' countries. If you are if you don't know where Mahdi is, and somebody said to you, well, people who live in Mahdi or murderers and all that, you will hesitate to go there. Or if you feel that, well, I know Heliopolis, and I better go to Heliopolis rather than go to Mahdi, which I don't know, even if things are good there. I think I'm better off going to Heliopolis. So because of lack of information, there was very high risk perception amongst Africans about their continent.
One of the functions of the bank, as I had read in statements by you, is to promote intra-African trade. How can we promote intra-African trade when we have two main issues? I'll leave one on the side right now, but I'll concentrate on the fact that we have poor infrastructure between ourselves. Most of the countries in Africa, they don't even have direct flight routes, which makes it very, very difficult to ship, to trade. What can African Zinc Bank do anything to sort of work or promote governments to develop infrastructure to make it easy for us to do business to business? Rather than go west, we go north and south instead of going east and west.
I agree with you that there is infrastructure constraint to promoting the trade. But where I disagree with you is that it is a constraint that makes it not to happen at all. My feeling is that if we begin to conduct the trade, then the volume of the trade will make it possible for private investments in the infrastructure that will take the trade along to happen, because they become more bankable because the trade is happening. Now, having said that, I tell you that despite these difficulties, trade is going on. Total African trade that is recorded is about intra-African trade. It's about $160 billion. Total intra-African trade that is all recorded, informal, is about $90 billion. If you add 90 to 160, that's $250 billion. If you take total trade today to be $1.3 trillion, you're talking about 20% of total trade. So despite these infrastructure deficits, trade is happening. Having said that, we recognize that there are problems. And one of the things we are doing in the African Export-Import Bank is to find ways of helping to remove the infrastructure constraints. And removing them involves, in the short term, making sure that the airlines that help carry people and carry the trade get the equipment they need to do that. That is why we arranged for Kenya Airways a facility of $2 billion to enable it acquire aircraft to carry people and trade, not only within Africa, but also between Africa and the rest of the world. We also have done that for other airlines in the region, Arik Air in Nigeria, Air Cote d'Ivoire, Fly 540, and some of these. We are also making it a priority to also deal with one of the problems that affects the trade, standardization and harmonization of standards. If you have somebody who wants to export electronics and he had to meet the standards of 53 other African countries, it is a challenging task.
Yes.
Whereas if we have a harmonized standard that will make it possible that an Egyptian exporter of electrical equipment knows that if he meets the standard, which is also the standard here in Egypt, he can sell it in Nigeria, can sell it in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, in Cote d'Ivoire. It makes things easier. It reduces the cost of the trade.
Yes.
Another thing we are doing to remove some of the constraints is the work we are doing to use mobile payments platform to promote regional, intra-regional payments.
What do you mean by mobile payment platform?
You know, many African countries and even at the AU level have been saying they want to promote intra-regional trade. When countries make policies, the assumption in the policy they make is that the traders who participate in the intra-African trade space are traders that trade in the same way that those who trade with Europe are, you know, the way they're organized. But we know that is not the case. In the informal trade area, the trader that goes from one country to the other, the informal trader, travels with very small sums of money, $5,000, $1,000, maximum $10,000, $20,000. He goes, pays for the goods, and carries them across borders. Yes. So if you want to make sure that that particular trade enters the formal sector, what you do is to create a system that will make the participants to participate. And the mobile payment is that system. If you use the mobile infrastructure, so the buyer in Egypt wanting to buy something from, say, Tunisia, can easily make the order through the mobile phone. And under the platform we are creating, we will provide kind of a clearing arrangement, confirm the order to the seller, say, in Tunisia. And based on that, the shipments can happen. The added advantage of this is that it will reduce the foreign exchange cost of the trade, because we will make sure that based on the clearing arrangement, the only foreign exchange payments will be when we clear, and those who are in deficits are made to pay dollars to cover their deficits, which we think will be a great thing for the continent, also a great thing for intra-African trade.
There are lots of projects that have been initiated at small and medium size enterprises, so to speak, but there was always a problem, especially for the SMEs, with the financing. Projects whereby you would get the know-how from one country in the region, the financing from another part, and maybe the location in a different part. But usually small and medium enterprises suffer from strict regulations which they cannot overcome vis-a-vis financing. What is African Bank doing to encourage SMEs to grow?
We know the importance of SMEs in economic development. We know the role SMEs are playing in Asia in promoting their exports. and also in promoting employment and economic development. So we are focused on making sure that SMEs participate in the work we are doing. There are two main areas we are focusing on. One is to work with SMEs to prepare them through an incubation arrangement to make it possible for them to access finance. You see, banks are regulated, so they want to deal with entities that have accounts, that have good governance practices, and so on, because that's what the regulator wants.
Risk, to reduce the risk.
Because the regulator wants to make sure the depositor doesn't lose his money.
Exactly.
So, which is all okay. So what we are doing is that we will create an arrangement whereby the SMEs go through a preparation phase. We'll give them advisory, prepare them, help them develop a proper accounting system, governance system, and incubate them. Those who successfully pass that incubation will then be eligible to access financing from us and from other participating banks. Another way we are using to support SMEs is through factoring, because many SMEs are able to supply goods to processors and all those others who operate in export supply chains. So with factoring, we are able to make it possible for an SME to get paid immediately delivers goods, thereby making sure they receive liquidity to continue to do their business. We're already providing such lines of credit to a number of factoring companies here in Egypt, and we intend to expand it.
What about, what can the bank do to encourage self-reliance within the African continent when it comes to strategic commodities? Unfortunately, the colonial legacy, as you had mentioned earlier, is still somewhat within us, and most of our strategic commodities within the continent, we rely on importing them from outside Africa. When can we reach a stage whereby we say our bread and butter, so to speak, is driven from within Africa, and we're not poor in resources to do this amongst ourselves? How can a bank like the Import-Export Bank encourage that this concept is promoted within this continent?
We recognize this problem, and I can dramatize it more. You know, the global chocolate market, the size of the global chocolate market is about $120 billion. The size of the global raw cocoa beans market is between 10 to 12 billion dollars, and almost 80% of cocoa beans is produced in Africa, and most of the chocolate is produced outside Africa.
So we send the beans and then end up importing it as chocolate.
We don't, the value chain, we are at the low rung of the value chain. You know, we lay the eggs and others eat the chicken for us. So that is one. And another thing, an example of what I said when I made my investiture speech. In 1977, you needed 1 ton of coffee beans to buy a brand new car, an average brand new car. Today, you need 10 tons of the same coffee to buy an average brand new car.
Why have we been that devaluated? Why is it that our
That is the danger of over-reliance on commodities, as you mentioned. So until we in Africa recognize that this is not the way to develop, we will remain poor. Our bank was created to begin also to solve this problem. That is one of the major reasons why our bank was created. And the way we have tackling the problem is, one, to support intra-regional trade, because between 50 to 65% of intra-regional trade is in manufactures. And if you encourage intra-African trade, you are encouraging the value addition in the trade. And when companies begin to manufacture for export and sell within the region, they will gain knowledge, they will gain expertise on how to manufacture for export. Over time, they will be able to then compete globally, export to other parts. The other thing we are doing is that we have arrangements that support the value addition in African commodities. For example, we have an initiative we call the Africa Cocoa Initiative. And that Africa Cocoa Initiative has the objective of increasing the proportion of African cocoa, raw cocoa beans, that are produced in Africa and processed here from 17% when we started about 2 years ago to 35% by the end of next year. We have made quite significant progress there, and we actually want to expand this to other commodities, whereby we are able to encourage processing of the commodities that are raw commodities that are produced here.
What about the quality? Because this is a problem that we always have. I mean, in Egypt, for example, we have good cotton, yet we have a problem with the manufacturing of high quality of the material, for example. So we export raw cotton and then we end up importing the material itself. What can we do so that we elevate the level of production so that it meets international levels, thus meeting international pricing?
Well, one of them
so
is...
we're not always cheap, let's put it that way.
One of them I said is promoting intra-regional trade. The quality may be lower, but it will enter the regional trade. Over time, the quality improves. That is one. The second thing we are doing is our export development program.
Okay.
So we are bringing entities that have experience in producing, manufacturing, and exporting to the major in Europe and America to partner with Africans. And largely discussions and bringing manufacturers in China and in India, for example, to partner with our African processors, so they will learn from the experience and be able to manufacture for export and have market access in those markets. So these are some of the things we are doing to be able to improve the quality of what is produced so that the markets will accept them and we are able to gain market share in manufacturers. The backbone of any developed society is health and education. Unfortunately, we have a problem on both sides. We have a problem with our healthcare, or the quality of healthcare in most of the continent, and at the same time we have a problem with the level of education. Is African Zim Bank doing anything to work on those two fronts? I know it's import and export, but if you want to increase import or export, then you have to increase production, which can only be done through a healthy, educated person. We are doing quite a lot now on healthcare. We launched recently a health and medical tourism program. Okay. Because we know how difficult it has become for the expanding middle class in Africa to have access to good health care. Those who want to have access have to travel abroad. And sometimes many people die under emergency conditions because they can't get visas to travel and get help. So what we're doing in Afrexim Bank We've gone into an arrangement with King's College Hospital, London, which signed a memorandum of understanding to develop a center of excellence in Africa to help deal with largely the tertiary care, the complex diseases. Beyond that, under health and medical tourism, we are financing companies that are developing very good hospitals in the different parts of Africa. We want to encourage countries like Egypt, like South Africa, that have better care to also continue to improve themselves and create linkages, as India has done, with other African countries, so that those countries can also send people to Egypt or South Africa in a way that is easier. So we are doing something there, and we are committed to making a difference in healthcare. With regard to education, today I just had a meeting with a senior official of the Africa Capacity Building Foundation.
Yes.
We are not an infrastructure bank. It's the African Development Bank that does that. But the discussions we've had with the Africa Capacity Building Foundation is to find how we can support them in creating the kind of knowledge that is required. For example, we have started discussions on how we can work with them to deal with the knowledge required to promote intra-regional trade. They will make us a proposal, and we will see where we can play a role consistent with the mandate of our bank.
Doctor, okay, we have another two sets of problems interlinked. On the one side, that the West still wants to meddle, and it cannot detach itself from the old colony legacy or presence that it used to have. This is exhibited in different shapes and format, including the funding of terrorism, which is taking place within our region. This is one side. Another problem is that the number of young people, especially, that are migrating out of our continent is another concern, that we'll be losing qualified people, or how can we get the Africans who have immigrated to contribute to the development of this continent, to share their know-how within this continent, the sense of belonging. How can we overcome those two sets of problems?
You see, I do not want to blame others for our misfortune. I think Africa has come of age. We have to take our destiny in our hands.
Yes.
The world is a marketplace, is a place where everybody is competing for limited resources, including qualified human beings.
Yes.
If Africa starts developing and they don't have access to resources to enable them, and they can find it in the moon, Africa will go there to get it. So I will not blame anybody that tries to access resources to develop their economy. Africans must know what they want and do what they have to do to develop their own economies. You said sense of belonging. We need in our different countries to create a sense of belonging for the greater number of our people. We need to do more to make our countries more conducive for people to live in and to work in. Invest in infrastructure, make the environment more livable in, create opportunities for young people to, to exercise their right to work. People leave because they cannot find work.
Yes.
So if we are able to focus on doing this, we will not have these problems. And whoever comes here to try to meddle will not be successful, because we will be strong. and the people will have patriotic attachment to the continent. So I think it's not something we can solve in one day, because we've had many years of devastation in our continent. But I think that we are doing something in the right direction. Many countries are beginning to do things in the right direction. Africa has improved, much better than it was maybe 15 years ago, and even improving. That is why you are seeing many countries and regions creating partnerships with Africa. You didn't hear that before. And that's because now they see the opportunities in Africa.
And when we talk about trade is usually between a buyer and a seller. Unfortunately, even though we have countries that are quite rich in this continent, we also have countries which we would call, in a very simple fashion, way below the poverty line. How can we, a bank such as African Zim Bank, work towards the elevation or the lifting of the standard of countries that are really suffering from extreme poverty due to so many different reasons, including maybe natural catastrophes that are taking place?
Well, the way we've done our strategy is to recognize that the continent has countries at different levels of development. And for each category, we have special programs to support them. We have a program we call Country Program. And this program goes to support countries undergoing severe difficulties. And when that happens, our board allows us to approve limits that will be higher than will have been the case otherwise. And we are able to give more attention and more time to those countries, making sure that our help targets challenges that we believe will help them to begin to come out of those difficulties. Of course, countries that are at high levels of development, we also have special programs that will help them to even grow faster, to take advantage of the capacity they have built and make them to compete better, not only within the African market, but also globally.
Are you working with the different central banks within this continent to make sure that we have some kind of a monetary system that complements, where we can complement one another to facilitate maybe financing and trade more? Is there something done on that front?
We are doing something with the central banks, but not the monetary system, but the same results to what you have just said. We've created what you call the Central Bank Deposit Program. We've seen that over so many years, the total amount of deposits held by African central banks exceeded $450–500 billion. The irony of it is that most of these deposits are held with banks abroad, who will lend it to Africa at higher interest rates. So that means you have net capital outflows from the continent. So what we've done is we created this central bank deposit program to make it possible for countries, for the central bank or the different member countries of ours, to deposit money with us and higher interest rates. This money we use it to support projects and trade within Africa. So from a benefits position, it's a superior argument than what obtains today. It has not been easy, but many central banks are becoming converted and agreeing, seeing with us. Some of the central banks, we've discussed with them, they can make certain deposits with us, and then we commit to use those deposits to to finance projects and exports from their own country. So the central banks take the risk on us as a bank, we take the risk on those projects. Then you see that that money goes farther than it does today. Because first they will get better interest rates, we will lend the money to their countries, the money will then create more money, so there's more wealth in the different countries. So we're doing that, and we hope that we can expand it. Many central banks still have certain kinds of guidelines that are restraining them from joining, but we are breaking the barriers gradually.
For a businessman to invest in Kenya, Nigeria, Egypt, somewhere in this continent vis-a-vis Asia or Europe, for example, how can you convince him to put his money here, set up a business here, rather than east or west, when, as you were saying, we're considered a higher risk area? What is the incentive that we can offer the businessman to invest here?
This is about perception, but you understand it. We understand that people think that certain countries are risky. So what we do is that we have a country risk guarantee facilities, and we have investment guarantee facilities. So those who want to invest, who are concerned, can come to us, and we are able to give them country risk guarantees to cover them against the country risk of the particular countries they want to invest in. We have used it severally in many African countries. We even have a particular program that we use to encourage foreign investors to participate in some privatization activities going on in different countries.
Okay.
You know, to do these privatizations, sometimes governments make certain commitments to prospective investors. Some investors don't trust the government.
Because of even changing regulations?
No, I think it's because of the saying that markets have long memories but short vision. They believe that, well, certain things that happened many years ago will happen again.
Yes.
They're not seeing where Africa is today and where it is going. So what we do is that we provide guarantees to protect such people from the likelihood of the government's reneging on what they said they would do, which encouraged whoever it is to make the investments under the privatization program.
What kind of guarantees? Can you give me an example? How can you guarantee something like this? Because you have no control over a government's policy. What if the government does renege on its agreement? Change the rules and regulations for the investor. I mean, in Egypt, we've had a problem with that you'd have a regulation and then a new government might come into office and change it. I mean, this was one of the investor complaints in the past.
Yes. You know, we are a bank established by treaty. All the governments that are member states signed a treaty, which are ratified by the parliament.
Yes.
So this is the contractual relationship between us and them. So if we guarantee something, government commitment, and the government does something different, and we pay out money on that, the government owes us money. Okay. So you're the liaison between the government and the investor. Because the government has, by law, the law establishing our bank in the different countries, they've said they will not do these things. So based on that, we give other people commitments. So if they do it, we go to them and say, you reimburse us our money. So that is the basis of some of the things we do. And I must tell you, unlike what people think, the African governments are not as terrible as that. We've not had a situation where the government did something that made us lose money. We've never had to pay out on a country risk guarantee. Even where problems had arisen, the government made sure that we got repaid.
Okay.
Yes.
One of the sources of income, high income for any country in this continent is tourism. We've been blessed with a lot of natural resources that can attract tourism in this continent. How can we work towards promoting intra-African tourism? Because if we look at it, we all travel, but within the continent, we don't really travel that much.
Well,
how can we change this perception so that we interact more?
I think one of the problems is visa. Sometimes it's easier for an African to get a visa to go to Europe, go to America, than to go to another African country.
Which is a catastrophe.
And of course, issue of transport. We are dealing with that with financing the airlines, as I mentioned. But the issue of visa is a simple thing. The governments had to make up their minds on what they want. Because if somebody wants to come to an African country, from one African country to the other, and it will take forever to get, or even it will not even get any visa. The person has a vacation, it's a fixed period. If you have a vacation for 2 weeks, and it takes you 1 month to get a visa, are you going to wait for the visa? And somewhere in Europe, or you get a visa maximum 2 days, you will go to Europe, even if you don't really like or want to go to Europe. So I think one of the things is to begin to find ways of reducing the barriers, caused by immigration laws in member countries. If we can do that, because after all, some of the countries allow non-Africans to come to their countries visa-free. If you look at some of the countries, they allow others to come visa-free, but they don't allow Africans to come visa-free, because the people believe that other African countries will come and occupy, or kind of become illegal immigrants in the different countries. But if those people are not illegal immigrants in Europe and all those, I don't see why they would be illegal immigrants. I think somehow there had to be a balance. I understand the concerns of the different countries. Nobody wants to have an unplanned population increase, but I'm not an expert in immigration. I believe something can be found to make it easier for people in Africa to move within Africa and encourage inter-African tourism.
As we talk, we might have some young or potential businessmen who, Egyptians for example, who are watching and they're thinking that, well, I want to invest somewhere in Africa. Maybe I want to set up a business in Africa, but I don't know how to go about doing it. What can African Bank do to help this up-and-coming potential investor in deciding where to go, how to go, the financing? Where is the edge, let's put it that way?
I will encourage them to come to the African Export-Import Bank. We are organized to help such entities, to guide them to the different markets. We have a corporate finance and advisory department that can provide the advisory services that will enable them access such markets. Within our trade finance department, we have an intra-African trade facilitation unit that will also help provide information and organize the kind of financing that they may need. We also have an export development program that will be available to such entities in terms of linking them up to the right partners in the different African countries. What that means is that we have a one-stop shop in African Export-Import Bank to guide the people. And we don't have other programs. The Investment Guarantee Program, the Country Risk Guarantee Program, and of course the normal project financing that can support such people wanting to go into other African countries to make investments.
What about a non-African entity that wants to invest into this continent? Do you guide them vis-a-vis certain countries? Where is the investment opportunity? We want the know-how to come to our continent. How is this bank working with that?
The same thing. Anybody wanting to invest in any part of our member country will get the same kind of service. And we do offer to many prospective investors all these services, the advisory, financing, project finance guarantees, to enable them go to the different African countries.
So you offer a non-African as well the same guarantees?
Yes, as long as they will invest in Africa.
Yeah, I understand, but the same, the risk-free kind of formula, it's offered to non-Africans as well as African investors.
Because we are interested in the investments happening in Africa, yes.
What about in terms of building projects in the line of renewable energy? We're blessed with lots of resources, as I was saying, and Egypt, for example, right now is really moving in that direction towards building a lot of energy facilities, utilizing renewable energy. Is Africa doing something to promote this?
Thank you very much, Dina. This is a very interesting area. We are, and so one of the good things this government, the Egyptian government is doing, is a focus on energy. I think the government came in and they want to solve it, and they are not leaving no stone unturned. And an aspect of what they are doing is in the renewables. And I want to tell you that we are involved in it. We are discussing some projects, and we want to support those projects. We're already supporting some other projects in the power sector. The renewables is a priority for us. We are discussing with the German Development Bank, KfW, to work with them to support the opportunities that we see here, for which we've started discussions.
Yes, Dr. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut our discussion here. We have